Welcome to the D&D Fitness Radio podcast, brought to you by your hosts, Don Saladino from New York City and Derek Hansen from Vancouver, Canada. We were doing a lot of stuff outside, so...
Let's talk about that for a second, because I did, I woke up this morning early and started to do somewhat, when I say a deep dive, it was funny because I think you could see the percentage of how much you've actually been able to accomplish through all of your stuff, right? And I think I'm only like 15% in, but I just, there's a 20-minute video and then a 15-minute video and you're watching all this stuff. And I was trying to sit there and like poke holes and be like, is there anything that like does it? I mean, Jesus, man, like congratulations, seriously. It's so good. It's so simple, but it's so detailed.
It was really just okay, just jump in with 2 feet and let's do something. And what do I think people need to know? And I just used it as an exercise to go, okay, well, how can I make this platform useful? Like, what are the things that when I usually send a training program to somebody, like I'll send a training program and then I'll send a list of exercises with videos, but then, okay, well, what equipment do they need? What should the warm up look like? All these things. So I just thought I'd pack it all in, and it's probably way more than, than I needed to. But at the same time, it's like, this is just a one-off. I'm going to figure out how to do this and then get feedback. Right.
Yeah, I mean, the value is incredible. I mean, you should sell, in my opinion, 10,000 of those. I mean, it's just so detailed in the sense of, even with like the sprint session drills, when you have the 3x10 meters, which with the marching A's and the skipping A's and the running A's, and if at any point you're like, all right, well, which one is marching A? Is that this? Like, sometimes you just click on it and it's just so quick. It's so easy how it's not a YouTube video. It's I
think Vimeo I use.
Yeah, Vimeo video. Yeah, Vimeo's fast though. It just pops up and I was laughing because I'm like, this is slave labor with your son and daughter.
It is. I got to pay them now. So, but yeah, so the idea of like, because usually I would do it like on an 8.5, 11 by 11 sheet in Word and do it every day you'd see. And now I'm like, no, let's make it phone friendly. Like, so it's like, and I tried to figure out what the dimension was to fit on a phone and hyperlink everything. And I'm like, okay, it took a lot of work, but what's good is now I can use this with anybody. So even clients that have maybe other specific needs, I can still use this as the base, because, a lot of time they're going to go through the same warm up. They're going to use the same drills. They're going to use the same start positions. So I think I'm going to support every online program with this type of model. So
it's actually it's pretty incredible how you did it. Actually, a light bulb went off, because obviously I do my own, I do all my own programming, and I do a lot of programming, but it was very detailed, and it doesn't seem like it's a PDF where someone can steal it. I kind of like the whole format. What did you use from what's the word I'm looking for?
A platform?
Platform, yeah.
It's called Kajabi, Kajabi, right? And I can't remember how I stumbled. I just went on YouTube and like, what are the best course platforms? And then there were some compelling things about it that I liked. So I just kind of went with it. And there was like some online not courses, but sort of like Zoom sessions where you could go on. And I actually went into a couple of virtual sessions and talked to other people. And there was like people from the Middle East, Europe. So there's this woman from France who gave me some ideas, and it was just, and they're doing different things. Like I think she was doing like a visualization course, and somebody had another course on real estate in Mexico. And actually, when I jumped on those things, I'm like, fuck, I don't want to talk to anybody or show my face. Right. And then I did, and I talked to them, and they had actually very good information about what they did and how it worked. And I have a little side chat on a app called Discord, which is a gaming chat app. So like if you're playing video games, you can jump on this. But she used it for her course. She said, yeah, you should really use it. It's free. And it works really well. I really like it. So little things like that where you just kind of learn from other people and go, oh, okay. And then you just try it.
Yeah.
So, and then I got Pat Davidson you do it, and then so he's got the hype crew doing it, and they're
Now
shooting
they're
videos.
all and now they're all promoting it.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, of course.
So it just gets out there because people are doing it, and it looks kind of cool. So people want to
But
eat.
it's also
Regular
simple.
people want to join in.
It's all simple. It's also simple, and I kind of want to dive into that a little bit today on our discussion. I definitely want to talk about the program because it's a special program, and I actually ran through your first one, and there's a lot of similarities here to it, but for some reason this just fits a little bit better into what I'm doing now. Like I don't with me, and I'll be transparent. Like the explosive med ball work, the body weight circuits, that stuff I'll eliminate because I'm doing all my other type of
Yeah,
resistance training, which is
yeah,
fine. But when all said and done, like I actually did Monday's workout today, and I'll repeat it again on Monday. But I just wanted to kind of jump in and just feel it out and see how the software worked, and just kind of it's just my way to kind of say, all right, how do I kind of adjust so next week I can jump off onto this program and
yeah. The progressions are very subtle. So like if you do 200 yards of sprinting, then the next week you might do 240 yards, and it
right.
just goes like it's. I don't
Well, it's
change the exercises too much, and
but that's I think what you do is brilliant, and the reason is because it almost reminds me of traditional programming where like I think people have too much variability from week to week in a lot of their training and a lot of their progressions, and because of that they don't see improvement, or they get injured, or they plateau too fast. And it's like with strength training, like you'll hear so many strength coaches talk about it, like keep the jump subtle, be in the game for the long haul. You're trying to power lift, you're trying to strength train. Like there's like you shouldn't be, trying to hit PRs every week. What I liked about this program, what I love about this program is the marching, the skipping, and the running warm up, which takes you probably no exaggeration, what 6-7 minutes. It's like
yeah,
not
yeah,
it's not very long. It's you just it's and I thought it was I appreciated the video that you had with your son and daughter because you give people a taste on what the tempo should look like and what all right, well, by the last warm up set, you're going to be going harder. And, it's something you should just kind of progress into and make it playful and feel it. And I appreciate all those words that you use. But then when you go into the falling start workout of the 10 meters by 5 sets and the 2 minute break, all in, I mean, you're looking at what, 20, 25 minutes, maybe, right? I mean,
yeah.
it's not that big of a deal. And I actually eliminated my warm up today before my lift. And I used your warm up and I used these drills because they were at 80%. It's not, and I went into my warm up. I was loose that much faster. My body felt incredible. My body temperature was up. And honestly, like my energy level today has been out of control high. So I want you to, can you talk about this a little bit? Because there is, when it comes down to elasticity of the muscle and when it comes down to as we get older, you're in your 50s now, I'm in my early 40s, approaching mid 40s. And, we all talk about the difference between flexibility work and mobility work and breathing and trying to get our body to restore to this place of, when I was 20. I think that's the ultimate for us is how do we get up every day out of bed and how does our back not ache? Or how can we go into training and how do we feel great? And how do we have bounce in our step? Or if I'm crossing the street in New York City, how can I just go into a run like I was when I was a kid and not be like, all right, take it easy, take it easy. And for some reason, this style of training, every time I go back to it, I'm not telling you I have to eliminate flexibility work or mobility work, but I feel like I can get there that much quicker. And what I want our viewers to hear right now is this is so important, yet it's so overlooked by so many strength coaches.
Yeah, it's and again, I'm drawing from my own experience too, and
But
um,
that's what we want to hear. I want to hear
yeah,
you're the expert in this category. I want to hear why.
yeah, I'm the middle-aged dad bod guy. The like an example, we're doing renovations, and we went through the house, everything from plumbing, heating to electrical. So we went for a walk. We're like, oh, we need a break. We went for a walk. And then the contractor, called us and said, hey, I got the electrician. He has a very tight schedule. Can you come now? So we were about a mile away or from our house. And we're like, okay, let's just run home. Like, and if you're 51, I don't know how many 51-year-olds are going like, yeah, let's just break
Just run
out of a
home, yeah.
walk into a run. And it was a pretty good pace. It wasn't like, it was probably like a 7-minute mile pace or something like that. But it was good. Like I'm going and I'm like, oh geez, we can just run. Like, and the whole point is that we can do that because we've imposed that demand over the last whatever 6 months, and so we can do that. But can many people do that and not get into trouble or just fall over and pass out? And so that was really kind of cool that we were able to just go, and this is me and my wife, so the two of us, like, hey, let's just run. Ran, got back. We're breathing a little hard when we got to the house, but other than that, it was pretty easy. So it was like transportation. So those types of things. And the other thing I've seen through that summer speed program is that we had a lot of people sign up, everyone from trainers, coaches, physical therapists. And you know as well as I do, like some trainers and physical therapists and people are in good shape, and some of them aren't, like they're average, whatever. So you would see them do week one and they would send videos and post videos of them doing it. And I'm like, okay, well, guy's a little heavier, doesn't have that elasticity you were talking about. And you just try and be positive, like, hey, I could criticize the technique and say, hey, you're not lifting your knee enough, but they haven't really done much training yet. So you're just going like, hey, just keep doing it. Right. So they keep doing it. And then guess what? By week 4 or 5, they post their video. You're like, holy shit, that's way better.
Kind of works itself out.
Yeah, it wasn't me coaching them like, do this, do this, do this. It was like, just follow the program and put the runs in. And guess what? Now their knee comes up because when their foot hits the ground, they have some elasticity and it bounces up. Mm-hmm. And which was very cool. Like I kind of knew that in working with younger athletes and pro athletes and all that. But when you work with somebody who hasn't done it, so they've, it's the use it or lose it thing, right? So if they haven't trained that and they're in their 40s, it's going to look pretty bad for the first 4 to 6 weeks. It's going to look sloppy. It's going to look not very dynamic. But guess what? Over time, like I said, 4 to 6 weeks, people start looking pretty good. And I was shocked. I'm like, and people are doing this in New York City. People are doing it Florida, wherever they are, Georgia. And so they're posting, and I'm just getting a high out of watching them get better, which is kind of cool. I mean, it's one thing, obviously, to see somebody improve body composition and say they're running this far and whatever, but to actually see somebody move quickly and efficiently is actually pretty inspiring. So that whole process has been really interesting. And, and honestly, there's been a few injuries too. People like, I pulled my hamstring or my adductor or my calf or something. And so as soon as that happens, you go like, okay, you're fine. Just drop the volume a bit and the intensity a bit and just start back with the drills. And guess what? Within 7 to 10 days, they're back again. And they didn't go to their physiotherapist or their doctor or anything. We just told them, like, just change the work a bit and then they're back. So that was kind of cool too. So it's not like you're not going to have these little
setbacks.
Yeah. If anything, anticipate it and you learn from it. So that's been very cool too. So just by doing this online program, it's been a bit eye-opening. Like I know you've done a lot of virtual stuff, but this is kind of my first real shot at doing it to a mass audience.
I don't know, man. It's pretty spectacular. I mean, it really is. It's one of those things that I feel like if you got everyone doing it, I think like 90% of the population would just move better, feel better, look better. And it almost, it makes you start thinking, a lot of times with people listening, they put the priority of looking better first because it's a lot of them do because it's sexy and they're looking at themselves in the mirror and they're like, wow, I didn't look like this in high school. And, I used to do this. Or it really comes down to, as you start moving like crap and your energy level starts diminishing, your activity level is going to diminish. The way that you push yourself is going to diminish. It's just like, when you're used to driving a car that's 500 horsepower and then you're suddenly driving a car that's 200 horsepower, like the performance is different. You're going to be able to cover less ground. It's just the reality of it. And I really believe, I've always been a believer that as much as I'm into the aesthetic portion of all this stuff, performance has to come first. And if you're getting up and you're not feeling good, your knees are bothering you, your back's bothering you, you start approaching life and training just a little bit differently. So honestly, poking holes, I mean, I think it's fantastic. I already know what I'm pretty much in for because I went through your last program and I kind of browsed ahead and I did see it's a little bit different. There's a little deviation to it. But what I like about it is if you wanted to eliminate the squat jumps, I understand the importance of that, but you still could get a little bit of resistance training work in there too. and maybe just eliminate the body weight circuit, or maybe do the body weight circuit days, or maybe, I still think the explosive med ball work, that stuff's really important, but you could still mix other things in with this. It's not going to take up your whole life.
Yeah, and I think the thought process was, I don't know if people have access to weights or gyms.
Hmm.
So, okay, go get basketball and fill it with sawdust or sand if you don't have
Hmm.
a med ball. And
Hmm.
so it was just kind of, what can we do given the limitations of access to equipment and facilities and all that. So but I think like you said before, like just take what you need. If you got access to weights and you're doing a lifting program, then just do the runs. So I think that's what I've been trying to tell people. This is kind of a starting point. It's not a absolutely you have to do this to be good. There's just some ideas in there.
Okay.
And
And
then
listen, sorry about that. Go
and then
ahead.
the other thing is every week I just ask people to do a little talk about something. So I had, Nico's talk about stretching. I had another guy talk about recovery. I had Adam Ross talk about
Nutrition.
nutrition, right? So I have all these things in there from people. And I just thought it's neat to have like, hey, this week you get to talk to this person or listen to this person talk. And so, I got some thoughts about that for future projects of having, it's nice for me to have a course or whatever, some sort of event, but it's nice for them to see somebody else's face too. Like they get bored of this face pretty quickly. So
I love it. I love it. I love it. I don't get bored of it. No, well,
you'll
it's awesome. Well, talk to me quickly about the different terrains. The one thing that you discuss is changing up terrains, and I have heard coaches talk about this, but when you hear people talking about speed work, they're like, "Oh, treadmill outside." It's kind of like frivolous. It's like an afterthought, but it is really important. So I noticed on more of the tempo runs, you were more on a turf field or maybe a track, and then there's speed days where you have them on maybe pavement. Can you talk about your thought process on that and why?
Yeah, again, it goes back to what people have access to, and maybe they don't have a track, or they don't have a turf field, or they have a grass field that's all dried up or full of potholes. So you have to give people options, all right? So if you're going to be on pavement, I make sure it's short. I make sure it might be uphill. But the whole idea is that you can only sustain so much impact if you're not used to it. A great example, after the first week, uh, the guys at Hype were training at Union Square on
Hmm.
the cement there, I guess, and they did the warm up, which you talked about. And Pat Davidson, I think his shins exploded or something, and had like massive compartment syndrome, and
Oh
so
God, I love
he
it.
was in pain, and I think he still tried to complete it, and um, that's a problem. Like he hadn't done that type, like he's done mostly gym work and maybe he ran on the treadmill, but going outside and running, and he's about 210, 215 in terms of weight, and then
Is he?
he's
I thought he
doing.
was bigger than that.
I think he's lost some weight,
Yeah,
maybe
that's
in the
I
last
did
little
see him,
while.
and that wasn't a jab to Pat. I think he looks great. I mean, he's an absolute beast.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
So
oh
he's
yeah,
a
but
little
when I
more.
talked to him, I think he was like 2 and a quarter. I thought, but
Oh, okay. Maybe he's lost about
oh
10
maybe
pounds or so.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Who knows? Maybe I'm wrong.
Um, but he did that, and he said the one thing I haven't done is a lot of like foot contacts or impacts, right? So right there, him starting on concrete, probably not the best progression for him. So if they had a grass field, and eventually they did move to a grass field. um, so those are some of the things that I look at in terms of what's going to be the impact on somebody. If you're a marathon runner and you're running around the streets of New York City as part of your training, you're used to the harder surface, right? So your muscles tune to that surface. Um, but if we had them do a lot of runs now, that same person, if you had them do a lot of runs on a soft trail now, they're probably going to have some setbacks because their body's not used to it, right? It's a longer ground contact time. They kind of squish into the ground. And it's the same thing with shoes. If you're used to, like, I think I use, I use like a Nike Pegasus, right? And it's kind of compliant. It's kind of soft. And it took me a while to get used to it. But when I go run on concrete, it feels good. If I go to the track, it's a little different. It doesn't, if I run on grass, it's too soft. So you
Hmm.
almost have to tune whatever shoes you're wearing to whatever surface you're going to choose, right?
Right.
And I'm sure it's the same with you and the on running shoes. Like there's probably a shoe that you like when you're on pavement versus
100%.
when you're on grass or turf or a track, right?
Well, that's what's been fun. It's working with On now, I get access to so many of their great sneakers, and and I love to run, but every time I go for a run, there's always different types of runs that I'm doing. And I basically can look at my program for the day and say, all right, what do I want to be in? What do I feel like I'm going to be able to perform a little bit better with? If it's a sprint, I like definitely a little bit more of a, thinner, I don't want to say more of a barefoot style shoe, but just something that's, yeah, just basically thinner, maybe like a more of like a street. Does that
Yep.
make sense?
Yeah,
More
like
like
a
a street.
minimalist type.
Yeah, more of
Yeah.
like a minimalist sneaker, and more longer runs. I definitely like something maybe a little bit more cushy. So that for me has been fun. But you mentioned marathon running, and it's funny because everything I feel like even in strength training, it's like this is a sprinter, this is a marathon runner. You always have that difference. I mean, they're so black and white.
Hmm.
But with marathon training, which we know it's what is it, 26.6 miles. We know you have to train at high distances. We also know that a lot of marathon runners that I've met have had issues with their body, right, because of the long-term wear and tear on their body. I feel like that their training is very one-dimensional. This type of training would probably be very beneficial to distance runners, even though it's very different. And a distance runner would look at this and say, oh, this is just too short. This isn't working on endurance,
Hmm.
but this is in a way working on resiliency, correct? And speed,
Yeah, it would be like their strength training,
right?
honestly. That's the best way I could define it. Like you're going to strengthen your feet, your lower leg, your hamstrings, your quads, your back. So I would say it's just a different, it focuses on different muscles. Like here's an example. If I go out and sprint, do short sprints, like out to maybe 40, 50, 60 yards,
Hmm.
I'm going to be more sore on my hamstrings after that type of workout. If I go for a long run, I feel it in quads and calves more, right? So it's just the way you propel yourself. So when you land in long distance running, you kind of just land and then kind of vault over that foot. In sprinting, you're attacking the ground and pulling underneath you, right? So you're using the muscles differently, but that same elasticity that you get from sprinting and that work on the hamstrings will transfer to your longer distance running and make it more, I guess, efficient. I guess the running economy improves.
Yeah, I would assume it's almost an impossible question to answer if you were talking to someone from distance running and long distance running and short distance running. And yeah, it does change. I mean, what you've been preaching to me when we're doing shorter sprints is kind of that hand to, what is it, almost chin to pocket, right?
Yep,
And
out in front of you.
getting those knees to go a little bit more vertical and kind of
Yep.
driving them into the ground where you almost, when you first start doing, you don't really trust it. You're like, wait a second, how am I going to go forward?
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
like,
yeah.
right? But at what point, like, I know there's not an exact speed, and this is an impossible question to answer, but what point do you feel like that transition starts happening? I mean, distance running, you're not running with your knees as vertical, correct? And as you said, the ground contact's going to change a bit. Can you talk about the difference? Can you talk about when does it become more about that vertical motion to more maybe of, this becomes more of about a reach and pull?
Yeah, and again, it's very different for the highest levels. Like if you could look at the world record holder, the same dude that ran under 2 hours, with the pacers and all that. His name's Eliud Kipchoge. I can't pronounce his name properly, but um, he's running like 436 miles over that marathon, right? So 436 is fast. Like I couldn't do that once, or I couldn't do a 400-meter segment or quarter mile in that pace. Like it's just so fast, right? So that would translate into him maybe running like a mile, like I said, a straight mile. He could probably run it in 3 minutes 50. I would say that's probably a good mile for him, 350 to 355, which means you're running quarter miles in under 60 seconds, right? Which which is fast. Like I think I ran that, in high school, right? Under 60-second, 400 meters
That's
when I was
flying.
young, right? So he's sprinting relative to most people, and so that means he could probably run a quarter mile in like under 50 seconds, which means he
Wait
could
a
probably.
second. Do the math on that. Sorry about my dog right now. This is called COVID. This is COVID podcast now. We don't have soundproof rooms anymore,
Your
so we
dog's
got
name COVID.
to be a good name. Wait a second. He's running a fourth. What'd you say? A 430 mile?
Yeah, 436, I think it is, 26 times consecutively.
Right. So 430 miles. So what would that be if you were, so what does that come out to on the 100? So the 100,
17 seconds, I think. I don't know how many times that is, but it's like a hundred hundreds or over 100 hundreds in 17 seconds average. Like 17 seconds, you may think, well, it's
it's
10 seconds, but
no, it's moving. It's
yeah, so which
moving.
means he could probably run an 11-second 100-meter one time, which is faster than
But
most
a
people.
400, his 400, you're saying it's a consistent 60 second 400,
Yeah, roughly. Yeah, like
which
just over 60 seconds, like
I don't know
over.
if I can. It was UPS. I just lost seven boxes in your garage. I'm like, great. What did you take out of it? I'm just kidding. So sorry about that, Derek. So 60 seconds. I don't even. I don't know if I mean. I'm sure I can. I think I can run a 60 second 400. That's still tough right now, right? I mean, what's
Oh
the
yeah, that's if you could do that, I'd be shocked. If you could go out and run like 60 seconds over around a track, that's a good time. That's a really good time for somebody who doesn't really focus on that. Like obviously the world record's like 43 seconds, but that's really moving. But if you could get somebody running repeat 60-second quarter miles,
oh
like
repeat? Yeah, but
that's
repeat. I mean once. I mean
once,
once.
yeah. Like as an example, a friend of mine, he's in his 30s. He's 35. He was a world class swimmer, and now he likes to do running. So I said, go to the track, see what you can run a 400 in. And he was like, the first couple were like 75 seconds, 72. Then he got down to like 68, and I'm like, that's pretty good, right? So he was
Mhm.
a decent athlete, but him doing a 60-second
That's fast.
400 is asking a lot.
Who's the guy? The guy who broke the 400 record at the last Olympics? Who was he? A South African, or he was
Yes,
from?
he's like
Yeah,
4303, I think. Yeah.
4303. And I think I remember he had a coach who was, I think it was an older, like an older female. I think she
Hmm.
was in
Hmm.
like her 60s, right?
Yep.
If I
Yep.
recall correctly. And I remember them. He was very well spoken. But I remember afterwards when he won, I think they said he was the first. Correct me if I'm wrong here, but they said I thought they said he was the first guy to win in lane 8 or set a
Yes,
world
in that
record.
race. Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
and they were just like, well, normally someone in lane 8 has a disadvantage because they can't see anyone. And then when they asked him, they're like, well, you had a disadvantage and you broke the world record. He goes, yeah, no, I was so scared the whole time I was running because I couldn't see anyone. And
Well, the
because
other thing about lane 8 is you have less curve to run because they stagger you, and so you don't have to run as much curve. And if any curve you have to run, it's not as tight, right? Because it's in the outer lane. So there is an advantage
there's
from
a
a
bit
physics
there,
point of view.
right.
But yeah,
And
he
that's
and
weird.
he's
It evens out, I guess, right? I mean, I don't know.
yeah, yeah. I mean, if you're fast, you're fast. I'm not. Yeah, I mean, there's psychology involved, but yeah, if he's fast, like he was the first guy to run a sub 10-second 100 meter, a sub 20-second 200 meter, and he almost ran a sub 43-second 400. So I mean, the dude's fast, So
What events do you think translate? So, like when you look at the 100 and the 200, Bolt won both of those, right? So it's kind of obvious that there is somewhat of a translation there. But how? I mean, if you were to stick someone in the 400 in the 100 or someone in the 100 in the 400, how much of a discrepancy do you think there would be there? Or has anyone ever done that?
I think Bolt was considering it
At the
because
400?
yeah, because his height played to his advantage, right, in terms of the stride length, and um, I just think he never did it because I think the schedule is very difficult to do all of those events because you have heats, qualifying, semifinals. And so there's this overlap of all these events that makes it very difficult. But if the Olympics was spread over a broader period of
He
time, I'm
probably would
sure.
have won
Yeah.
that,
Oh,
right?
yeah. 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 If he decided and if he thought he could make more money. But I think it just came down to economics. It's like, why would somebody decide to go into track when they could make the NFL and make so much more money, right?
Right.
I could be an average guy in the NFL and still pull in 3 to 4 million a year, or I could be, the third best guy in the world in track and pull in like, 200 grand a year or whatever it is.
Right.
So
And you can also dilute yourself. You have to look at that also. Like if he goes in the Olympics and decides to run the 400 and he runs in the 400 first. Well, I don't know what event's actually first, but one of the events, I mean, he can kind of blow his load early and then dilute himself and not. I mean, it's got to be incredibly stressful when you're going up into an event like that and you've trained for 2 years or I'm sorry, your whole life. And out of nowhere, you have to go perform on the biggest stage on the planet. And I mean, I guess the amount of pressure and the amount of, stress on the human body. I mean, I'm sure I've heard stories about a lot of these athletes after they're done, like they're just mentally exhausted.
Yeah, that's again, if you decide to do another event, then that's another couple of races, right? It's not
Mm.
just one race. If it was just one race, it's a different thing, but you have to qualify and do all these heats and something could go wrong. You could false start, you could I don't know, step out of your lane. So it's yeah, it's a lot of work. And then you got to run the bloody relays and pass a baton and there's a couple of heats of that. So um yeah, there's something to be said about specializing in, a few things and not spreading yourself too thin, right? It's
100%.
tough. And then
100%.
as you move up in race distance, then the energy systems change altogether, right? So if you're really good at running the 100 and 200, you're probably just, very good alactically, anaerobically, right? And you're all fast twitch muscle. So if you move up to the 1500, well, now you need bigger lungs and you need more slow twitch muscle. And it just, there's a reason why people are in the events they're in, so.
Can you talk to me a little bit? I know I'm throwing 1,000 questions at you right now, but I really, I think we're on to a lot of this running and prepping the body to run and your program and how so many people who are getting into that older population pretty much give up on something they did as a kid. They give up on that playfulness. They always think it's like, well, I got to go run a mile or 2 miles or three miles, and they don't understand how user friendly 10 meters is. If they can just start preparing their body to move fast and take their time over a period of time, how their body's going to feel. But I know you still add stretching into your programs. I know it's something that you still put an emphasis on, but how heavy of an emphasis do you have to put on it when you're training like this?
I mean, as part of warm up, we don't do a lot of stretching. Like it's a lot of movement, it's a lot of dynamic stuff, and it's just kind of warming things up. Hence the warm up. But certainly, my wife and I spend a lot of time stretching in the evening. So whatever workout we did, we stretch in the evening to address those areas, whether it's, like I said, hamstrings, calves, hips, low back. And if we don't do that, we certainly feel it the next morning when we step out of bed. So that's something that we've kind of built into our routine where, okay, like we don't do yoga, but certainly we go through, maybe like somebody in yoga would go through all the body areas and we do the breathing stuff and all that as part of it. So that, and then it helps us sleep, right? So it kind of settles us down. And then when we go to bed with, everything kind of falls into place. So that's what I'm trying to, even in this program, this virtual program, it's like, hey, if you're going to do your stretching, do it later in the day once you've, identified the areas that you need to target, and it will settle you down and improve your sleep. So I think you have to kind of separate those things out. Like recovery has to be separated out a little bit, and it's a separate activity altogether.
Hmm.
And you can't just keep hammering your body and hope that things work out. So, I mean, we've learned that through trial and error. And like you said, when you're 20, you can do a lot of different things and not have to do all that stretching. But even then, I think you need to do that. Um, it's just part of the routine now. We just know we have to do it.
It's funny because stretching is always something that I prefer to do in the evening because when I was commuting in and out of the city, you're dealing with a train ride coming in. So what would happen was I'd go into the gym, I'd work, I'd get my dynamic warm up, I'd get my lift, my energy systems work, cardio work, call it what you want, and go about my day. And then I get on the train, and typically you sit for an hour, you come home, and you just listen, you just don't feel right. You get off the train, you got a 10-minute car ride home. So you've been sitting, an hour, 10, hour, 15. After a long day like that, your body really feels tight. And 10 out of 10 times when I would get home, I would stretch, take a shower, have dinner, avoid my, avoid my handheld, avoid any blue light. 10 out of 10 times, the night's sleep improves drastically. But you were the first person who talked to me about stretching the posterior chain. And I think there was some research or science that you read about in reference to how you do that and improve sleep. Was there ever any data discussed on why, or was it just more like this works for me type of thing?
There wasn't, like, there were some rat and frog studies that I looked at. Like I
Did they
was
have
doing
the
this
frog
deep
stretch
dive.
hamstrings?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think in those studies, like nothing in humans, but they were looking at these animals and they found some sort of link between that hamstring posterior chain and the central nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system and sympathetic nervous system. So if they use those muscles and they shortened, that's the fight or flight versus trying to lengthen those muscles, which would create more of the parasympathetic rest digest, right? So, like even last night, I was doing some renovations yesterday and tearing down a ceiling and like plaster and shit hitting me in the head. And it was just stressful, right? So I didn't get a chance to stretch as much yesterday. So in the middle of the night, I was just like a little restless, get up, stretch my hamstrings, probably about 5 minutes, fell back to sleep, no problem.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's my go-to for some reason is just the hamstring stretching.
I have a little 5 to 10 minute program that I do in the evening, and it's like a godsend. And nights where I get, listen, it's tough to be 100% consistent in anything, but the nights I get, bogged down with something else and I don't do it, I don't sleep as well. I don't move as well the next day. I don't have that bounce in my step. So, yeah, 100% on that.
And there is a connection, I think. The friend of mine, he was saying like he thinks there's a connection between hip flexors and hamstrings. So if you sit, like you said, sitting is probably the worst thing. Like I've noticed now as an older person, if I sit for long periods of time, whether it's working at the computer or like you said, I haven't been on a flight for ages now, but that really kicks my ass in terms of the sitting or prolonged standing. So if you're stuck on the subway and you're standing, those two things really mess with my pelvic area.
Mhm.
But the hamstring, he says that there is a connection between hip flexors and hamstrings because one's a flexor and one's an extensor of the hip,
Right.
right? So he says if you can loosen up the hamstrings, it'll loosen up the hip flexors reciprocally, right?
Mhm.
So those are two areas I focus on:
Right.
hip flexors and the hamstrings,
Right. Right. Right.
the
Right.
H's.
Now I normally, sorry about that. Again, people coming into the house yelling when I'm on a
Home
podcast.
office, the home
The home
office.
office. Sorry about that. So there's one thing that I've always recommended people to do, and I'm sure you get the question asked a lot. How do I sit 8 hours a day, and what stretches can I do to help improve that? And it's pretty difficult to think that 10 minutes of stretches is going to unwind 8 hours of damage. But the one thing that I always try and promote is to make sure that people aren't sitting for more than 30 minutes. And I know it sounds extreme, but I feel like the best stretch is standing in a way. And if you could take those 8 hours, cut it in half to 4 hours, and then you throw, a good routine, a good mobility routine, call it what you want in there, you're going to see drastic change. Is there any rules or laws that you try and live by with the people that you've always worked with?
I just make them conscious of any chance you get. Like you said, that 30-minute interval, if you can
Hmm.
set an alarm. And
Hmm.
I think there's some computer apps or phone apps that say like stretch or breathe or whatever.
Right.
Um, that you're going to focus on those two areas that I talked about, like the hamstrings and glutes, right? So on the back side of your body and the hip flexors on the front side of your body. So if you have a chance, like even if I'm sitting in my chair, now and then I'll do a leg drop, like I'll turn the chair and drop one of the legs down so it stretches, elongates the hip flexor. Um, and then obviously I'll try to get up and stretch my hamstrings. But if you can target those two areas, usually it's going to resolve like chronic back issue, and just even knee pain and stuff like that. Like my father was complaining about his knees. I guess he had stretched his ACL when he played football back in the day, and I noticed that his hamstrings were just really tight. And I said, just roll out, loosen up your hamstrings. And he's like, yeah, it helped.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
big time.
so where a lot of people might think it's a quad issue or a joint specific issue, and it's like, no, you're just tight. Like, and I think it sneaks up on people.
Right, right.
And then by the time that you know how it is, like I'm not going to crap on doctors and physical therapists, but a lot of the time you get really tight, things get sore, and then you're like, my knee hurts. And then guess what? You go to the doctor and guess what he focuses on? Your knee. Right. And it's like,
Like
well,
X
maybe
never marks the spot
yeah,
almost.
yeah. It's like your hip, it's your hamstring, right? You're just tight, right?
Right.
So a lot of those times, I just, if you can get people, like you said, to move regularly, do a few stretches, and it sounds really hokey and like, oh, that's too easy, but it usually is the answer. There's something to do with the tension, and then even just the chronic stress from whatever, pandemic, job, whatever. So I think I found that the breathing, we talked about this before, the breathing is so important as part of this. And I watched the Joe Rogan podcast, and they had a guy on there talk about nasal breathing. So I've been
Hmm.
trying to do that more and,
Hmm.
take deep breaths, and I found it help.
100%. I just had Alana Kessler on, who's a nutritionist and yogi, and we actually did. You can check it out on my
Mm.
Instagram TV, but we literally went through probably, I want to say it was a 15-minute breathing segment where she broke it up into like three different segments, and she started with nostril breathing, and she went through a whole different series of breathing, and it's just you never feel bad after doing that. It's
Oh,
it's like
absolutely.
it's like a guarantee, and it's tough for a lot of people to digest and understand that breathing can allow your body to feel better and help with recovery. But it really is the truth. So I'm going to check out that Joe Rogan podcast. But
James Nestor, I think he has a book.
James Nest, I'm writing this
I
down.
think he has a book, and so he talked about like even at night, like putting tape on his mouth when he sleeps so that he can breathe through his nose. And that I almost had a panic attack when I thought of that. But um, and then so
No,
wait,
no, no. But mouth tape. Actually, a client of mine recently, a client of mine, one of my challengers recently brought mouth tape to one of my challenges. It was like, "What do you think about this?" And I didn't know much about it. And I reached out to Dr. Belisa Vranich. She was like, "No, I like it." And then I started thinking, "Well, I have a deviated septum. It's slightly blocked. Is that going to be good or is that not going to be good?" So I'm curious. I think I got to try it. But yeah, it kind of makes me feel a little.
yeah,
I don't
because
know
he
if I don't.
said it's like again, it's a use it or lose it proposition. If you don't force yourself to nasal breathe, you'll lose that capacity over time. So I'm like, oh shit, okay. So I did a couple of runs where I just said, okay, I'm just breathing through my nose on this run. I almost had an
Almost done.
anxiety attack, right? I had to start breathing through my mouth. But I saw like Mark Megna, he puts on like tape during his ergometer stuff, and I'm like, okay, well,
I
so I'm
don't mind.
working on it.
How about the breathing masks? Tone just brought me one of those. So he brought me a breathing mask.
Oh, like
One of those
the altitude.
altitude. Yeah, yeah. What do you think of
I,
that?
my understanding is it doesn't. It just builds your like your lung, your capacity, your diaphragm's ability to suck the air in. So like, have you seen some of those things? There's a thing called a spiro tiger, and it's like a bladder that you breathe in and out of,
No.
almost like a balloon. Like it's like this, like a hot water bottle or whatever. And there's a couple of those devices where you breathe through filters and you breathe through it, and it's supposed to improve the musculature around your breathing, so you can suck in more air. It doesn't necessarily improve your VO2 max or your lung capacity. So I would say the masks are the same, as opposed to like actually training at altitude
Hmm.
where you're living 24/7 with less oxygen. So then things change in terms of your red blood cell count. So I think there could be value in it, but not necessarily like altitude. It's not like an altitude effect. It's more the
Right. Sure.
breathing through. I mean, and that's what I wanted to ask you. Like, have you talked to anybody about just masks related to COVID and exercise? Like, are there things people are using that are
No,
good?
you know what? I really haven't. It's just one of those things where I always question. It reminds me of a supplement, right? Like, when people contact me, well, what supplements should I take? I'm like, you got to get your nutrition in check first. Like, your nutrition's a mess. You're not getting enough nutrients in. You're not getting enough micronutrients or macronutrients. Your training's all over the place. Your sleep's all over the place. Like, you can go buy supplements, but why if everything's so messed up as is? So with all these different, masks and gadgets, are those things we should be utilizing as like the final 10% of completing, this whole, fitness and wellness, you know, what's the word I'm looking for? Like circle. And where, are we jumping into these tools? It reminds me of this. If you take a newbie in powerlifting and you have them start doing board pressing and chain pressing, it's like, dude, like let them get stronger at the bench, the squat, the deadlift. Like, let them get stronger at the basic lifts. Once you get crazy strong and now you're a power lifter and you're looking to improve, 5 pounds in 1 year, then that's when we have to start relying on different types of tools to kind of get there. So that was my question about the masks, or even what you're talking about, like running with the COVID masks on. Is that just making things more difficult for someone that right now just needs to build
Yeah.
confidence and focus
Yeah.
on getting those reps in?
I agree. If you're going to the Olympics and you want to win a gold medal and you're looking for that 0.1%, then it gets interesting. But it's like the guy who's like, I'm going to take up golf and buys the most expensive golf clubs, and
Yeah,
and or
yeah,
the classic one is the guy who's the triathlete and buys like $20,000 bike, and he wants to. I'm going to do my first triathlon.
yeah. And then it hangs in the garage. I love it. That's so good. All right, well, that's cool. Well, I'm curious about with the masks, when you said it probably does more of an effect to the diaphragm. If you ran with that, do you have to continue? I mean, obviously, I understand breathing will help, bring will help get the body parasympathetic and get it to calm down, and you get into that resting state. But all the benefits internally of the diaphragm moving, do you feel like wearing a mask would kind of take care of that, to where the breathing now just becomes more about getting the body to relax?
That's a
It's a
good
good
question.
question.
I
It's not a
haven't I
bad
haven't
question.
spent a lot of time on that. I know some people who've messed around with it who tended to be more like I would say aerobic based athletes, again, like swimmers
Hmm.
and runners. And again, they're going for that couple of percent. I don't know. I mean, I think for a lot of people, doing those things is part of the adventure, right? So like, oh, I'm going to start running, and sometimes you want to buy the nice shoes, or you want to have something to kind of motivate you, and the fancy watch that gives you all this data. Do you need it? No, but it's kind of cool to have that stuff. Like, I think there's something to be said for using those things as incentives, But as far as like having this great training effect right off the bat, like you said, just do the work, and then
Mm.
eventually you can tap into those things. I just, like even with like the training program, the virtual training program that I launched, I could, if I was like a great businessman, I could probably go like, oh, as part of this, you can buy, this device or this equipment, and I could market it really well. But they really just need to do the training, right?
Right.
And they'll get the results.
Right.
So,
Don't sell the program short. I think it's incredible. And listen, just can you tell people where can they find the program? I think it's sprintcoach.com.
honestly, I'm just doing it because it's a separate platform. It's just there's just a link in my Instagram, my Derek M Hansen Instagram, in the profile there. That I just been using that and directing people to that. Um, I haven't actually put it on my website. So, because most of the people who are doing it have this sort of interactive sort of participation where like they'll post the video
Mm.
on Instagram or whatever. So that's the great thing about Instagram, is that 10 years ago, if you said, oh, do you use Instagram for your business? I'd be like, get out of here.
Yeah, what are you
But
nuts?
yeah, I know. What am I going to post pictures of? So this idea that somebody joins through Instagram and then we share their videos and they tag me or something, and it's like, oh, cool, I can just see your video
Hmm.
and critique it on Instagram, or I can send you an email, or I can do it, somewhere else. But I think that's kind of cool, where you can see them improving and you can encourage them and give them a few tips. But I mean, that's been the best part of it, I guess, is just seeing people get the results by doing the training.
I love it.